Pep Guardiola, Jose Mourinho, Rafa Benitez, Carlo Ancelotti and Vicente Del Bosque. What do these 5 managers have in common?
I think Xabi has conditions to be a very good coach.
Well, they all helped to create the managerial mastermind that is pulling into focus right now, and that guy is called Xabi Alonso, which leads us on to 2 important questions. Firstly, how did they all sprinkle their magical managerial dust on Xabi Alonso? And secondly, where will he manage next? Both of which are fantastic questions, and both will be answered in this video. In 2017, Xabi Alonso, well, he retired from professional football with a total of 19 major honours spanning over 3 different clubs and for the national team, of course, as well. Get your notepad out or your phone or whatever, just take note of that, because you're going to need it later on, okay? Now, of course, we're all aware of the success that Xabi Alonso is having right now at Bayer Leverkusen. But what he did before joining Leverkusen is crucial to note, and again, get your notepad out, and it shows a lot about Xabi Alonso, the person. So when Alonso finished, he returned to his native Spain to complete his coaching badges with Real Madrid, but from there he went on to secure his first management job as the manager of Real Sociedad B, which was really important because it allowed him to learn on the job, but without the same pressures that you've seen from other midfield greats like Lampard and Gerrard. But after 2 great seasons at Sociedad B, in which he secured promotion from the Segunda Division B, he decided he was ready to join Bayer Leverkusen. This is another thing that's really important to remember about Alonso, because much like he was as a player, he does things in his own time when he feels it's right. So the decision to appoint Xabi Alonso at Bayer Leverkusen was actually a very brave one. He took over from Gerardo Sione, who despite having had a poor start to the season, was still perceived as a really good manager.
Interestingly enough, the decision makers at Leverkusen that I talked to around that time were actually quite happy with Sione's work at Leverkusen, and they actually thought it was a very difficult decision to part ways with him. And one of the things that I heard at the time is, look, there is no doubt that he is going to get a job in short order, and at the next club he will be a successful coach.
So this was the last ever Gerardo Sione lineup for Bayer Leverkusen. It was a Champions League match away to Porto, a match that Bayer were expected to win. However, after a 2-0 defeat, Sione was sacked the following day, and in came Alonso on the exact same day. Alonso takes charge of his first top-flight football match and sets up with a formation and an approach completely different to the previous regime. Amazingly though, the lineup only features 1 change of player, Mitchell Bakker in for Adam Lozek. And Alonso goes on to shock the Bundesliga with instant impact with a 4-0 win over Schalke with the exact group of players that had only scored 1 goal in their previous 3 matches. But of course, football's not that easy. Tell him, Manu.
Things didn't turn around right away.
After the high of dispatching Schalke, Alonso's team then went on a 6-game winless streak, conceding a total of 14 goals. A run that featured a 3-0 home loss to Porto, the team that had got the previous manager sacked. But this turned out to be just what Alonso needed. Am I right? Manu, am I right?
What he sort of did was to analyze the squad and realize that the players that he can work with long term and the players that maybe medium term that they have to move on from.
So after an up and down season, Alonso's first season in charge of Leverkusen ended in 6th place with 50 points. You know, a failure in comparison to the 3rd place finish with 64 points achieved the previous season. But what Manu said there about analysing the squad, it's crucial in all of this, because over the summer, Alonso and Leverkusen let go of 5 first-team regulars and brought in 8 new first-team players that would allow him to achieve what he wanted to. And this is where we started to see everything that he's learned from his career as a player come to life. Players that left: Moussa Diaby to Villa, Mitchell Bakker to Atalanta, Karim Demirbay to Galatasaray, Paulinho to Atletico Mineiro, Daly, St. Graven, Serda, Azmoun. And then the signings: Nathan Teller from Southampton for 20 million, Victor Boniface from Union SG, Granit Xhaka from Arsenal, Jonas Hoffmann from Mönchengladbach, Artur from America Mineiro, Matej Kovac from Man United, Alejandro Grimaldo from Benfica, and Josip Stanisic from Bayern Munich on loan.
They are not the sole decision maker, right? A manager is a head coach not like in England where the manager is the manager, right? Sporting director is Simon Rolfes, and he is the one who ultimately puts together the squad with the input by Xabi Alonso. But at the end of the day, every German club will put together a squad that can survive the head coach, right?
So there Manu spoke about how a manager in Germany is more of a head coach than someone who handles everything at the club. This is not dissimilar to how Pep's role at Manchester City looks like, with Txiki Begiristain making a lot of the calls when it comes to recruitment. But as Manu said, Alonso will have had some input on the players, again like Pep does at Man City. But there's a twist in all of this. In Pep's first transfer window, the big signings were John Stones, Leroy Sané, Gabriel Jesus, Ilkay Gundogan and Claudio Bravo, players that he'd identified, and all were jam-packed with potential. Well, okay, not Bravo, but the rest of them. This is a similar strategy to what Leverkusen used over the summer with their acquisitions of Nathan Tella, Victor Boniface and Artur. But there's got to be a little Mourinho twist in there, surely, and the signings of Xhaka and Jonas Hoffmann, they are very Mourinho. In fact, in the summer of 2021, Mourinho requested that Roma bring in Granit Xhaka for him. But a disciple of Mourinho certainly would now, wouldn't he? And this is where Alonso's managerial ideology comes to life. Mourinho even predicted that Xabi Alonso would be a good manager back in 2010.
His father was a manager. He was coached by Guardiola in Bayern, by myself in Real Madrid, by Ancelotti in Real Madrid, by Benitez in Liverpool. If you put all this together, I think Xabi has conditions to be a very good coach.
Alonso speaks about how Pep and Mourinho have different approaches.
They have different personalities, but and they have different approaches of the game. I think that both they adapt to the players that they have. Both managers, they like control.
But which of the pantheon of managerial talent that he's worked under does Alonso take after the most?
The fact is that you do see all those style elements combined in him. I do think there's quite a lot of comparisons to Pep Guardiola. He does play a little bit different in some ways. I would say his approach is almost a bit more German.
As much as we tried to crowbar it into a video, it just doesn't truly exist when it comes to his approach, and it's his own. You know, he doesn't really follow any of these managers specifically or exclusively. As Manu said, it's a bit more German. Am I allowed to say that? But what does that mean? Well, let's show you. For me last year, Leverkusen lacked a certain Torschützenkönig. What's that, I hear you ask? Well, the term Torschützenkönig is, you don't have to say it that way, is used for a top scorer of the team, but directly translates to goal king. Now, last season's top scorer was Moussa Diaby with only 9 Bundesliga goals. The signing of Victor Boniface from Union Saint-Gilloise has changed absolutely everything from the top down for this team. And it has happened in parallel with teams all over Europe moving back to classic number 9s in recent months. But with the newfound goal king, Leverkusen are making bold claims for the Bundesliga crown this season, and this is how they're doing it. Now, to understand this team, we need to look at Boniface, and I'm not talking about this little mush. At 6'4", he's not only an excellent striker in terms of bringing others into play, but he perpetually targets the space in behind, and this is crucial for the entire team. There are a lot of gems in this team, such as Grimaldo, the left wing-back, Edmund Tapsoba at the back, and Nathan Tella in attack, but the key players are Ezequiel Palacios, Jeremy Frimpong, and Florian Wirtz, who's super crucial, and they're all able to be the best versions of themselves through Boniface's presence up top. Also importantly, Xabi Alonso is playing all of these players in the positions in which they are best, in which is a minor nod, I think, to Ancelotti's style of management, in which he allows himself to be flexible enough to field players in their favoured positions and roles. In doing this, Alonso has helped guide Florian Wirtz to the level we all knew that he could be. Alonso lines up in a 3-4-2-1, which is on paper the same formation as he started out with when he took over, but has a twist to it these days. Instead of having out-and-out wingers in the attack, he now has 2 attacking midfielders who are given that total freedom in attack to move to any areas that they feel they're needed. Here we have a perfect example of this. Florian Wirtz, who many think is just as good, if not better, than Jamal Musiala, is in a central position and is surrounded by movement. Wirtz currently stands 7th in the league for the most progressive carries with 36, which is a fantastic stat given that he's a central player, but the player at the top there is also a Bayer Leverkusen player, and we absolutely have to touch on him. He is the personification of Alonso's personable and technical abilities as a manager. In the game before Alonso took over, Frimpong was not only playing as a right back in a back four and arguably being misused, he was also sent off for 2 bad tackles. Alonso recognised that Frimpong perhaps isn't the best defensive player and opted to play him as high up the pitch as possible, and he gave him that total freedom of the Leverkusen right side. So due to being Spanish, there's a lot said that Alonso's style must surely be similar to Pep Guardiola, especially given the possession percentages that Leverkusen average. However, that's not quite the case. Whilst Leverkusen dominate the ball and do like to keep possession, they do a lot of their best work in transitional periods of matches and often use the technical ability and pace they have in attack to their advantage. So it's not like for like similar to Pep, but there are some parallels, but there's some Rafa Benitez flavour to this mishmash of paella as well. From the top 9 players with the most progressive carries in the Bundesliga this season, Bayern Leverkusen have 3 of their players in the mix. Now look at this. This is the La Liga table for progressive carries. In 6th place sits Celta Vigo, managed by, guess who? Rafael Benitez. There are sprinklings of different managers everywhere you look in Alonso's makeup, and it's fascinating. Yeah, boy. It's very hard to nail down Alonso's team to an overarching style of play because his side will control possession and control the game at length, but will then use a fast-paced transition out of nowhere. His side is multifaceted, and it can hurt teams in different ways, and this is a very impressive consideration that he's put in place, considering that he's been there less than a year, but it may be expected due to how well read he is from working with all these superstar managers. So what about this new breed of managers? Because before we look at Alonso's possible destination and why he goes where he goes, it's important to take into consideration what the new breed of managers all have in common. In the past, it used to be that you have to have been a good player to justify being a manager. However, when Wenger and Mourinho came along, they disproved that alongside many others, Rafa Benitez, of course, as well. But now, football has moved on past that point, and we're now approaching a whole new criteria for managers. Look at some of the best modern managers around right now. You have Arteta at Arsenal, Pep at Man City, Xavi at Barcelona, and now Alonso at Leverkusen. They all have one thing in common. They were excellent players, but they never really relied on physical attributes when playing. They had successful careers by always being one step ahead of everyone else mentally, and now it's bleeding into their managerial styles, and we're only at the beginning of this too, so we might see a deeper strain of managers start to appear who have the same DNA. So who is the next one? Is it someone like Cesc Fabregas? Let me know in the comments down below. So we've answered how, but what about where? Where will Alonso go next? That's the question on all your lips, I know it is. So there are 3 likely options for Alonso: Bayern Munich, Real Madrid and Liverpool. And it all depends on the timeline of events.
It really comes down to what he is going to accomplish this season, I think. What kind of time frame that puts his coaching career in. Because if he does leave next summer, I think the Real Madrid job is the one that's first available. But if he doesn't leave next summer, then it could be Bayern and Liverpool as well, right?
So here's a brief overview of the timeline and how the external factors will decide Alonso's next destination. Ancelotti is leaving Real Madrid at the end of the season. Tuchel isn't on brilliant terms with Bayern, but isn't in any immediate danger. And Klopp's contract at Liverpool runs out in 2026. The last one there about Klopp's contract is the one that leaps out to me because of the following very likely timeline. You would suggest that Alonso doesn't win the Bundesliga but finishes second. He secures Champions League football. He then stays at Leverkusen the following season, 2024-25, to make a genuine title challenge, by which time Real Madrid job and Bayern Munich jobs may not be possible options. He then only has 12 months to wait before the Liverpool job becomes available. And Alonso's contract at Bayer Leverkusen ends on the very same day as Jurgen Klopp's. This is where Alonso's past experiences all come into the question, and the trophies we talked about earlier all come into play as well. As a player, he won everything there was to win, but some trophies evaded him at specific clubs. For example, he won the Bundesliga multiple times with Bayern Munich, but the Champions League always evaded him. And then at Liverpool, he won everything apart from that elusive Premier League title. These 2 gaps in his club-specific trophy cabinets may filter into his decision-making and could be the very thing that decides who gets their hands on Xabi Alonso at their club. Unfinished business could be about to get finished.